All right, so we are live here. My name is Grant, so it's a new face, as you can tell. I am not Kim. This I will be your host for NASET TV this week. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce our lovely panel down here of three. So if the first one wants to jump in first, we'll have Annette start.
Okay. Hi, I'm Annette Zinke.
Dan.
Dan Beach. I'm the executive director for the Maricopa Center for Entrepreneurship, and I'm here with Grant at the beautiful headquarters of MCE in the city of Maricopa, where it's 115 degrees.
All right,
Hey,
Trish.
Brett came back.
Hi, I'm
Hi, I'm
Trish,
Trish,
and
and
I'm
I'm
representing
representing
NASET
Reset
Flagstaff.
Flagstaff.
All right, Brett.
All right, Brett.
Go.
Go.
This is seriously sketchy, so I don't know how long I'm going to be in here. Our internet's screwed here. So, I run the SBDC in Coconino County.
Awesome. Well, so
Awesome.
this week
Well,
we
so
will start with talking about assumptions in business,
business,
specifically with entrepreneurs. You guys hear me
entrepreneurs.
well? Is it better now?
Maybe.
Okay, I think it might have been Brett. So I'll just continue on here. So we're going to talk about the assumptions entrepreneurs and startups had slash have um, relating to business and about their clients. And so we were going to discuss more about um, how to either figure out how the assumptions are, how they relate to, either MCE, NASET, or the Chandler branch, and then more specific or more broadly, how do they relate to business as a whole? So without further ado, I'd like to ask the panel. Um, so as a business owner, are assumptions bad, or do you think it's healthy to have some assumptions?
I think you can't not help us have assumptions. I'm working with a startup now, and you do the basic stuff, and you got to start someplace so that you make some assumptions. The scary part is, I think you start working with those assumptions, and all of a sudden they flip back in your face, and you realize those are really bad assumptions, and they're not true, and you've just built a part of the business on those bad assumptions.
I like to think of assumptions and jargon and habits all being kind of shortcuts for all the things that we do every day. And there are some things where you've gathered enough information and had enough experiences that you can make assumptions. But assumptions in business that haven't been validated, just like assumptions in relationships, can be really costly.
That's scary.
So would you say that businesses going into a startup, having assumptions, do you think that helps start your company in a certain direction, or do you think it's better to survey what's going on around the surroundings and ask your community, ask your target market, who you're really looking to either provide the service or to buy your product for? Who do you think it's good to have those assumptions to start out with, or do you think it really is just kind of? Do you think does it hurt your business?
I think it's essential. It is absolutely necessary to fill in the gaps in your knowledge when you're starting out with logical assumptions and emphasis on the logical. But I think that if you don't fill in your gaps in knowledge with something, you will freeze. You'll fail to act at all. So it's important to know that you've made assumptions in order to get moving. And it's important to go back and revisit those and see if you assumed correctly by getting actual evidence to fill in the gaps with real information instead of assumed information. But I think people don't act at all if they don't make assumptions in the beginning.
When you say, Annette, when you say fill in the gaps, what do you mean by that?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
When you say fill in the gaps in your knowledge, what do you mean by that?
I mean, if we don't know exactly what a customer preference would be, or what the pricing tolerance is, or how many we think will sell, we can make educated guesses about those things, but we don't have real data to fill in the numbers or the projections for what we need, what we want to accomplish. And so you have to guess something. You have to guess what the price range that a customer would tolerate will be. You have to guess, and it could be guesses based on some customer feedback, but you won't really know until somebody either does or doesn't pay you money for something. And so what I'm talking about when I'm talking about gaps in knowledge, it's because you didn't already sell something and have the proof of somebody giving you money for a product, you have to give it your best guess in order to get it onto the market in the first place.
So I guess I struggle with that because I'm torn between the just go do it and the call it the Peters method where it's the ready shoot aim and you develop the product and you start selling it and you see how it works, to maybe the business model canvas where you figure it all out on paper, you test all the assumptions, and then when you're confident that you know everything about it, then you go launch your product. And it's like, is there a middle ground, or are we just stuck in those between those on those two extremes?
I would challenge you that the business model canvases is in fact the middle ground, because you still can't know everything. You might be trying to get more answers than building a product that you're not sure your customer actually wants, or that actually solves the customer problem that you're not sure is a big enough problem that they'll pay for. Like the Ready Fire Aim has its downside. If it's a cheap product to make, Ready Fire Aim is great because that's what you use to test. That might as well be MVP, minimum viable product.
Yeah.
But if it's an expensive product to make, or it takes a long time to develop or a long time to sell, then you might want to start with a few more incremental steps, working with customers to try to get some of that information in advance. But I actually think the business model canvas and the value proposition canvas and all that are middle grounds, Dan, because you still don't know. You're never going to know anything with certainty until you get a product into the market and try to sell it. And that's why business model canvas and the lean process encourages minimum viable product, because then you can test small things instead of, here's my product, it's $1 million, can somebody please pay me?
So if that's the middle, what's the other extreme?
Here's my product, it's $1 million, can somebody please pay me? It's the way most government development was for a long time. It's we're going to go get our spec sheet from the customer, and we're going to go off and build it over the next 3 years, and we're going to come back and deliver this big. It is the Cerner method. If you're like big healthcare, they go build a thing that costs $1 million to deploy. They spend 3 years designing and developing exactly what you need, and then they bring it to you and tell you what you need. And it may or may not have everything you need in it.
It may not have anything you need in it.
Well, that too.
Yeah. And then you get to force it down the customer's throat, or or spend $1 million forcing it down the customer's throat, or you throw it away and waste the $1 million that you spent.
Right. And that happens too sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Big government development projects. And this is a lot of times with software. Not that government's really good at MVP, so it does, I'm not recommending that. But for small companies, it would be a whole lot easier to sell something small and incremental.
Yeah.
So I heard you guys mention the business model canvas. I know that we talked about that a lot in previous episodes. For the viewers who maybe aren't very familiar with business model canvas, where do you think assumptions play a part in that?
I think it's one big assumption. I think that it's a way to model what your business could look like, should look like, or at least brainstorm it. I mean, I've done it, and I'm actually falling in love with it, if you will. I'm going to use it tomorrow with a group of a nonprofit, which is sort of really isn't designed for that particularly, but I think it's a good tool to really stop and think about all of the elements that go into what a business is, from what the customer sees and buys to who the customers are to what resources do you need to produce all that stuff. But I think it really is everything you put on the business model canvas is an assumption. You're assuming you know who the customer is. You're assuming that the product you think of is what that customer wants to buy. You're assuming that the 3 or 4 or 5 revenue streams that you can imagine are viable. You're making the assumption that the partners that you are selecting are real partners and would really be interested in a product like this and partnering with you. So it really is, it's one big hypothesis, and I think what Annette was saying earlier is you go test each of the pieces until you're comfortable with that piece, and then sometimes it throws out some other assumption and you start over on that area and you redo it.
And the thing about the business model canvas and value proposition is it gives you a tool to capture those assumptions. So your first time through it, you're not going to be deliberating all of these things and saying, oh my God, this is an assumption and I have to go test it out. It's like it captures your assumptions so that you can then start to go investigating.
It's a big brainstorming tool.
Then you come back and work through it other times.
Trish, you made a really good point about capturing. I think maybe that's one of the best reasons to use a business model canvas, because it's really hard for us to lay out all the assumptions that we've made or the mental leaps. If I think back to a time when I worked with a lot of companies on financial projections very specifically, one of the things that I would ask them to attach to their financial projections were all of the assumptions that went into making those. So that's assuming how many customers, paying how much money, coming back how often. And if you don't write that down, you will never remember how you got to a particular number or a particular point in your business growth plans. And so this tool is a really good capture process for all of the little tiny leaps you had to make to say, you know what, this could totally work.
And I think it really goes to help the client out as well, so they can see and outline and follow the process. Like Dan had made he had made a paper that really outlines it through a grid, and I think that really helps the client find where they're at in the process and where they need to be, how many solutions, how many problems, and how can we mesh those together. So I really do find that tool that Dan had mentioned was really useful. And as well as capturing that as well. So I kind of want to transition into. I know, Annette, you've talked about this a little bit in what you had just said, but what assumptions have you encountered by working with local businesses and startups?
Well, I wouldn't ask me; I'd ask them.
That I have a market for the product. That I have a product and then I have a market for the product. Yeah, I guess my worst case was a customer who had a stick that he used in the back of his pickup truck to grab stuff out of his reach, and in his mind this was a phenomenal product, and he just needed money to develop it so that somebody would license it because it was the next piece of sliced bread, and it's like, okay, that's an interesting idea. Who would your customer be? And well, everybody. And it's like everything about what he was talking about was all about assumptions. Who his customers were, what his product was, that his product was valuable, that somebody wanted to buy his product and then resell it.
The everybody point's a good one, Dan. I have heard more times than I can count, legitimately at this point, that everybody is in my target market.
Right.
It's not targeted if everybody's in it. Everybody may potentially, who knows? Maybe everybody is in the iPhone's target market, but probably not. And I guarantee you they've narrowed that targeting down so focused so that everybody who might potentially want to be identified as a potential iPhone customer is already captured there. Anybody who kind of wants to be like that or has any other crossover gets captured into that target. But if you don't target narrowly by age and income and the problem that they experience and what the problem feels like to that potential customer, you have no targeting and you have no market.
I think one of the biggest assumptions too is what the product is, or that it's a good product, that it's a sellable product. And maybe the fact that if you say it's for everybody, then that just automatically says it's probably not any of those things.
Right.
Or you made huge assumptions.
With investors, a lot of people just assume that people will want to invest in their product. And they assume that the investors want to know more about the product than they do about the company.
Right.
And both of those, way off base.
Yeah.
Well, and Trish, I think I've heard you say a couple of times that you don't have a company, you have a product to potential or to clients of ours that have a thing they want to build a business around. And I think I remember hearing you say, "Great, that's a product, it's not a company. How are you going to build a company?" Can you talk a little bit about what you want them to think about?
I'm trying to recall saying that.
I've heard you say it, so you must have said it.
It's one of these things that Trish has these great little jewels that fall out. she forgets that she's had this pithy statement to say, but I think I've heard you say, "Okay, that's one product. One product doesn't make a company."
Right.
There you go.
I don't know what to say about it. It is just having a product is not a business. It's selling a product. I don't know how to elaborate on that. I'm sorry.
Dan, do you remember the context?
No, I don't
It's funny because I had
hearing her
that
say
happened to me today. Actually, I have a customer who's come in. She's applying to our M loan, and really, in her application is really, it's not about her business. It's about this product, and she goes on and on and on about what a great product this is. And I think I spent most of the time with her helping her understand that, just exactly that. It's not about the product. It's about how you package the product, how you produce the product, how you market it and sell it to the customers. And is it a one-time sale? Is it more than one time? We spend a lot of time on just that focus. It's like it's not the product. It's not about the product, and money is not about the product. The money is about the company.
Well, and where does that product lead? What's next after that? So let's say you sell everybody your great product. Let's say everybody does buy it. You sell everybody your great product. They buy one. It does the trick. Are you out of business?
Yeah.
Or what's next?
And part of the business is that how do you get there? Okay, great. I got the greatest product in the world, but how do I sell it? Oh, and before that, how do I market it? And before that, how do I get people to know about it so that I can market it to them, so I can sell it to them, and so I can provide that great product? I mean, the product is in the middle of the game, not the beginning or the end. So, big assumption there.
But that's a good point.
So we're doing, NASDAQ is doing some kind of a program next week about sort of on this topic, right?
It is. Reality check your startup.
Okay, so I'm going for a couple of startups that I'm working with, but I don't even know what it's about. Can you I think you know probably more than anybody. Tell us what this is all about.
Absolutely. So what it's about is based on based on actual customer feedback. Our clients and the startups that we've worked with over the years, we see a pattern of their actual behavior, not what they say is the problem. That when a company launches into business and fails to get the customers it was expecting to get, or doesn't know how to get the customers that they believe they could have, um, the problem comes down to mismatch. For these particular customers, sometimes it's an early mismatch between problem and solution, so they didn't quite understand how big a problem this was or how small a problem it was. A couple of examples. One, kind of a general anecdotal example, is, and it's probably been in a whole bunch of books, but there's the you're selling a bandage because you noticed you've interviewed 1,000 customers and they have skinned knees and they need something to cover, that skinned knee. But we don't ask enough questions to find out how they skinned their knee, because it turns out when they broke their leg, they also skinned their knees. And the Band-Aid doesn't actually solve a big enough problem to get you into the business that you want to be. I'll give you a really specific example of a client that was one of my favorite clients that I worked with for a long time, that eventually stopped trying to start because they developed a software product for the healthcare industry that didn't get traction. They had a couple of paying customers, but not enough. And the what we discovered was, yes, the problem he solved was a significant problem. Yes, it made a big difference. And the amount of money it cost them to either work around that problem or not solve it at all, just throw more people and resources at it, was not significant to a giant organization like a hospital. And the problem we discovered, and I don't want to use that word, so I'm going to say the hurdle that we discovered in his business model was that even though he was solving a totally legitimate problem that could be quantified, that the hospitals could have saved money by implementing, it wasn't painful enough for them to change what they were doing, because the pain of changing was way more than the pain of the problem itself. And that's a really hard lesson to learn.
Hmm.
So I guess that I gave you anecdotes instead of an answer. The answer is, we start with, how do you make sure you really understand the problem? Then how do you ask questions to see if your idea is part of the solution? Then in developing a product, how do you work with customers on a minimum viable product so that you get them to say all the way along the way, yes, this creates value for me. Yes, I will pay you for this piece of it. And you start adding together those pieces to make a real product. And then the last small slice of where companies get hung up is in taking, from initial discovery and development into actually scaling.
Annette, what kind of companies or people should be attending this training?
Preferably companies that have identified a problem they want to solve, or have a product that they believe solves a problem. And so the target audience is entrepreneurs and startups that have not yet achieved significant, in their minds, sales. So you are about ready to launch, or you have already launched and you aren't selling as much as you think you should, or you haven't started selling yet. So early stage startup companies that have at least enough of an idea that they know what problem they're solving, so that they can start validating some of those things.
Awesome. So I have one last question for you guys. How do we turn our assumptions into useful tools to help our business?
Ooh, tough question. You got us stymied.
Well, I mean, I kind of need to massage the question a little bit, because I think I don't know that you can turn your assumptions directly into a tool, but I think you could definitely I think you could definitely use tools to pick apart your assumptions. Can we look at that in reverse? Is that okay?
Yeah.
So what tools then, I'll ask a question of you guys. What tools would you use to help identify and disassemble the assumptions other than the business model canvas that we talked about? Have either of you used the value proposition canvas or other tools that you think are useful?
Yeah, I use the value proposition in conjunction with the business model. I think you have to use both of them, or should you using them both together? The last couple of times I've worked with clients, I've actually posted both of those up on the board, and we've gone back and forth between the two of them because you find that you solve or you make certain assumptions on the value proposition that immediately jumps to assumptions on the business proposition or the business model and back and forth. The other one that I think that Grant was talking about earlier was Patricia and I created what we call a business idea validator. So it's almost a precursor to those other tools. I tell people to spend 20 minutes on it. Think about the problems. Come up with the problems you're trying to solve. If you can't come up with that, you haven't got a product. If you can think about what you're trying to solve and you have some solutions, who are those customers? It's a precursor in a sense to the business model canvas. So I think that's a tool to begin to create assumptions.
It's a precursor to the business model canvas.
Yeah.
Because if you can't get through validating your idea, there is no point in going forward.
Yeah. Don't need to build a business model over it if you don't have a valid idea.
So how, not that I intended to ask this question, but how would somebody find out about that tool that you use? How can do they come to you and talk to you to go through the idea validation process? How can they access that?
Yeah. I pretty much give it to every new business that I talk to. It's just one of my standard documents. People come in to me, they talk to me about ideas. I hand them that and say, spend some time, fill this out. Even if you think you know what your idea is, take this home with you, fill it out, and then come back and see me and let's talk about it. And you definitely have some people that they fill it out and they come back and talk to you. And I think other people, maybe they take it, they work through it, and they go, oh, it's maybe not a good idea because I never hear from them again. But at this point, I would say it's in beta, so email us, anybody, and we'll get a copy of it to you, or we'll be happy to sit down and talk to you about it. How's that for a commercial?
Great.
And our website is currently being redone, so hopefully that resource becomes available online so that anyone who does need that resource or would like it is now able to use it. So I think that concludes this week. If there are any other final questions or comments from our lovely panel.
So where can people go to sign up for Reality Check Your Startup?
You should be able to get to it from NASET's Facebook page. And I know you can get it from naset.org/realitycheck, but I think you can also get it on our Facebook page. And you can also email any of us, and I'm sure that we can get you signed up for it. But it's happening Tuesday and Wednesday, the 28th and 29th, in Chandler. And we would love to get people in there and have them actually test and validate.
I'm looking forward to it.
I'm looking
Me too.
forward to it.
Same, I think I'll be there as well. So that we will not have NASET TV next week because Reality Check Your Startup is happening. So without further ado, I think we'll see you guys and viewers in 2 weeks. So I appreciate you guys putting in your input, and hopefully it helps some people figure out and solve some solutions here. So
Adios.
thank
Thanks,
you.
Grant. Welcome to hosting.
Thanks.